You pretty much answered the question for me, but just to put a little bit more into it, I was one that looked at the Russian crop last year, and on paper it was very, very large. I think originally we had about 2 million tons of yellow pea production out of Russia. Really, we were searching for where it was going to go. You know, the feed market wasn't that strong at the time. On paper, it looked like, you know, there was going to be massive exports out of Russia, and in addition to that, a huge carryout. As Vijay mentioned, there were some weather issues during harvest and quality issues. A lot of that product has been consumed domestically, and the production has been reduced on my personal S&D anyways, down to about 1.6 million tons. In saying that, Russian prices are very, very expensive. We haven't spoke much about French, but you know, in lines with French prices. The demand for peas within the European region has actually been very strong this past year. Besides a little bit of product that moved out of Russia to India early in the year, there has been nothing over the past few months. You know, going forward, I think it all comes down to price. You know, you look at, let's look at old crop. You look at old crop peas in India for Canadian origin, and you know, to give it a price range, you're probably somewhere in between $385 and $400 CFR equivalent. If someone were to look and want to buy Russian peas today into the Indian subcontinent, you'd be close to $450 CFR. So the price is the price, and it's just not going to come to India. And I think it's similar to new crop. You know, you look at new crop peas out of Canada. I've heard prices as low as $365. Again, I'm a buyer at $365 if anyone is offering that, but $365 to, you know, call it $375 for new crop Canadian. If you wanted to buy Black Sea Russian peas today for new crop, first off, you can't from the farmer. If someone were to take on a position or be a little bit aggressive selling, assuming that the farmer may sell eventually, I think the absolute cheapest, I would say 370 to 375, but I firmly don't believe that we're going to see those prices out of Black Sea.
You also see the pressure of slots in Canada for the new crop as well. From what I understand, everything is sold up until August. So any shipments that take place will have to take place going forward from August.
True. And really what we're trading is capacity. It's logistics and capacity. This past year, even into next year, you can throw the S&D out the window because it honestly means nothing. That's from a Canadian standpoint, it really doesn't have much teeth this year because you're really trading the logistics and the terminal capacity out of Canada.
One of the things that we realized this year was at a certain price, the Indian farmer is also incentivized to produce yellow peas. So if you looked at the Indian prices around 25,000 to 26,000 rupees, it seemed to be attractive for the farmer in UP and elsewhere to produce yellow peas. Do you see that going forward, something that's going to continue as a result of which there may be a supply side response in India?
I did not get your question, Vijay.
So what I'm saying is there a price at which the Indian farmer will be incentivized to produce yellow peas? Because of the devaluation of the Indian currency, even at $400 or whatever, you're around the 26,000, 27,000 rupees of yellow peas into India. At that price, is it worthwhile for the Indian farmer to change his habits
I will
and
not
produce
be
yellow
very
peas?
hopeful, honestly, because the fact is that they have the choice of other crops which give them better remunerations. It's wheat or rice or anything else, because they have the concept of MSP, and in all probability, all the times, all these crops sell at a price at par with the MSP or even more. So they are, in any case, are more inclined towards the other crops than the pulses as such, as a whole. So I don't see, a small shift in price of a rupee or two would really give them any incentive to go for pulses.
Anurag, what about you? You have something to add on that?
I too would agree to Varinder's argument, and I also believe that the farmers here will not shift easily, or they would not grow into plant more of yellow peas, because they are much better off growing the cash crops like wheat, rice, and they are more secured. until and unless, as we are also discussing with the government here, the association is discussing with the government that we include pulses in the food subsidy bill and allow it to be distributed through our PDS. If that happens, yes, the farmers will have more conviction to grow more pulses because they'll be assured of a market surely once they come out with these crops. So until then, I really don't feel that the farmers will really go in and increase their farming and cultivation of pulses.
Brett, is there a level at which the Australian farmer would produce more dung peas, and is there a level that you would look at?
No, Australian farmers don't chase or they use pulses in their rotations for a reason, and dung pea acreage has stayed fairly stable in the last few years. Our biggest increasing or decreasing in tonnage is because of yields, which is our weather conditions. Obviously, if the price went from what it is today, around 325 to 330 Aussie dollars to $400, well then yes, it would drive more acreage and displace another pulse out of their rotations. But saying that, they can't change that tonnage dramatically. One, seed availability, etc.
I want to throw the floor open for some questions. I'm running out of all the questions that I have, so I need some help here. Pradeep.
Rob Brearley, just generally to the panel, I think there's been a lot of discussion about the pricing of peas for human consumption and so forth, but I'm hearing a bit of consistency in Australia, perhaps out of Russia and Europe and so forth, about the growing demand for stock feed. And I guess peas at these prices are starting to price themselves in from a protein perspective. And I just wonder whether the panel might comment on, first of all, whether there is a growing trend back towards stock feed use at these lower prices, and what that impact of that might be on prices going forward.
Chad, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Early in the year that wasn't the case, but as the years progressed, we're definitely seeing feed demand. You can see it in the prices of French and Black Sea peas today. So there is good demand. If there was capacity in Canada for old crop, peas would work to Europe. Yellow peas in Canada would work to Europe quite well, actually. So, what happens next year, I guess it is comparative to other feed products, but over the course of the past few months, and I think for the next few months going forward, it definitely works into the feed channels quite well.
Pradeep, you had a question?
Yeah. Mr. Vijay, I have a question. We have covered Russia and USA, Canada, but we have not covered France. So if I would like to know what about the production of France and the price idea and the shipment period, is there any possibility for India?
Chad, you want to? He's asking about the production in France, and what do you think of exports out of France?
Okay. The production in France expected, I guess, for new crop is somewhere in the neighborhood of 550 to 575,000 tons. Of course, nothing is seeded yet, so that is up for debate and could change. Looking at this past year, zero exports to India specifically, or the Indian subcontinent. All of the French exports have ultimately been throughout Europe. And primarily that is for the feed channels. There's been a very, very strong domestic use of peas within France as well. But I'd say overall, I guess, year to year production about the same. I would maybe argue that because of prices, we could see an increase to production a little bit by maybe 10% or something like that. So I don't have the exact figure of this current crop, but I think it was about 525 to 545,000 tons, and we're expecting somewhere in between 550 and 575 for the new crop coming up.
Actually, over the years, the buyer in Asia has forgotten what French peas look like. So I guess even this year as well, you might get possibly one, maybe two at best, cargoes coming this direction.
That's quite positive.
Chad, one question. What are the carriage numbers for the coming year for peas cargo?
Out of Canada specifically?
Yes.
Just so I get the question right, the carry out in Canada, is that what you asked?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. It's estimated around 500,000 tons out of Canada for yellow peas.
I think this number has tended to vary a bit, but I'm not sure that's of any consequence because if you cannot ship it out, it remains in Canada, so it's not going to make any much of a difference to global S&D.
Yeah. And really, just to add 500,000 tons, 700,000 tons, you know, it's in the grand scheme of things, you know, you look at the wheat crop out of Canada and you're going to have a 13 million ton carryout. So peas is they're insignificant almost.
Chad, I have a question for you again. With 500,000 or 700,000, as we hear, it could be as high as 1 million ton. If these numbers are there in carry, and we understand from our friend from Saskatchewan that the acreage is going to go further up, do you see any pressure coming onto, because then we feel that this number of 370, 375, what you are saying, will not be realistic and we might see a dip of another $15, $20. Do you see this as a possibility?
Well, you have to look at the cost of production in Canada as well, and the values in Canada have fallen off significantly to the farmer. So, you know, how much does he sell when he's not making any money with his cost of production? So you have to look at that too. You know, the values today of what we're paying the farmer are very close to his cost of production. So, you know, do you see a real push, you know, late in the year because he has, let's say, take worst case scenario, 1 million tons of peas on farm? Like I just said, he's also got 12, 13 million tons of wheat. So I think he does have to look comparatively at the world prices. He knows that he can't sell everything, and he's going to look to see what he can get for the best value and sell that. Because, again, you know, looking at history, maybe 1 million tons of carryout is large for Canada, but with all the other crops on farm, something's going to sit there and wait. You know, everything cannot come to the terminal and everything cannot be exported out of Canada this year. It's a fact.
Thanks, Chad.
The other thing is new crop, as some of the speakers have mentioned earlier. With new crop, you don't know what the yields are going to be. And most of the projections that have been done with average yields. Last year was an extraordinary year. Yields were good in practically all the crops out of Canada. It's around 1:15, so I want to do a last round of questions around, basically, it has been the tradition here to do a bit of crystal ball gazing, and something that I want to do in terms of pricing going forward. There are two components to the question. One is, what do you think of prices going forward, and where do you think the consumption in India starts increasing? Is there a price at which the Indian consumer thinks that it's an attractive enough price to go in for incremental consumption? So can I start from my right, Virendra?
Well, it depends, I mean, on certain other pulses as such. Of course, the desi chickpeas and tur also to an extent, because yellow peas would be substituting them. And if their prices go up, definitely we can say some upsurge in the prices. But looking at the present day scenario, I see a dip, honestly, of about $10 to $15 to the prices which are being quoted at this level, 370. Given the logistic conditions, once they open up in July, so there would be a larger supply base available with 800 tons of carry over and the new crop and pipeline. So then I think there would be a slight dip in the prices until and unless local prices of other pulses go up.
Brett, you want to hazard a guess?
From an Australian perspective, it's very difficult. There's no new crop pricing out there, but trying to look into my crystal ball, it depends a little bit what happens in Australia with the desi chickpea crop. If it does continue to stay dry, then that will have a knock-on effect in the desi market, which will then potentially have a knock-on effect for